Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Weekly for Saturday, May 6th, 2023. It's been another great week of shows with great topics. Of course, great guests. We kicked off the week with a discussion about the resources available to caregivers of those with autism. Let's take a look.
Well, April being World Autism Awareness Month, it's really about supporting the autism community and promoting increasing understanding and inclusion of people with autism. While we talk a lot about it in April as part of World Autism Awareness Month, we firmly believe that this is a conversation that has to happen every single day throughout the year, and establishing the inclusion of people with autism really as a societal standard. We are a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to creating an inclusive world for all people with autism. We do this through a few different ways, through advocacy, state and federal advocacy, through research and our clinical programs, as well as services and supports. And we provide resources and information for individuals and their caregivers throughout the country. So we know the most recent prevalence rates by the CDC estimate autism in the US is about 1 in 36. And it affects roughly 1 in 45 adults. So my first recommendation would be to reach out to Autism Speaks. We have our incredible autism response team that provides information and resources to families all over the country. And specifically, we get a number of requests about where to go for a diagnosis, who to see for a diagnosis, and our team helps connect individuals and their families to those types of resources. And then someone who's trained in diagnosing autism will do what they do best. What we do know is that autism affects every single person differently. And we often have a saying, we say this often, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And so each person's unique experience with autism is very different, and the supports and skills and strengths that they have really will vary. And so for some, employment is absolutely an option, and for others, it may be a little bit more of a challenge.
Next up, we discuss the shortage in veterinarians and the need for pet owners to have access to telehealth. Let's take a look.
Yes, I think short answer, yes, but it's complicated, as you might expect. It's not necessarily nationwide. It's not necessarily there's a lot of different types of veterinarians. So, there's a lot of different parts to the sector. There's specialty care, emergency care, primary care, which is probably the veterinarian that most of your audience interfaces with the most. Large animal, of course, so food animal, equine, all of that. And so I would say definitely there are regional shortages, but there are other places where maybe it's not as bad, not across all types of practice. And we're still trying to get a handle on whether this is still a short-term temporary situation because of the pandemic. There's certainly some precipitating causes that came out of the pandemic. Some of those might be correcting now, even as we speak. But there'll probably be some longer-term ones too that we're working to counter as a profession. So if we back up, even a year, certainly 2 years in the pandemic. Of course, a delivery system that's never been super efficient compared to maybe human medicine. All of a sudden, the pandemic, not having clients in our waiting room, they're in their cars, and then having a fraction of the staff able to work at any given time, and not knowing how many people are going to be there tomorrow, right? If somebody once we got tests, of course, they test positive, they can't come to work for 10 days. So it's not dramatically different, I don't think, than we've seen in other sectors. You go to fast food, you go to a restaurant, you go to a store. We saw that kind of everywhere. But there are a few things maybe a little unique to vet med. One, there is evidence that more people adopted animals during the pandemic. They're working from home.
Yep.
So it took us a while to really grasp that, but it's since been shown to be the case. The economy though was pretty good going into the pandemic. People had a little more money. They weren't spending it on travel and some of the other things, so they're spending it more on their pets perhaps. And then things got backed up, right? They knew the dog needed to be seen for this or that. And now all of a sudden they can't get in for months, and so it backs up that much more. Same time, we had quite a few veterinarians and veterinary technicians, which are nurses, if you will, especially our technicians, finding more profitable jobs, more jobs that pay better, and quite a few veterinarians that chose that time to retire. The retirement finally doing well. Many of them own practices that they sold to corporate consolidators and did quite well. And so we have, we lost some people from the profession for sure, demand greater, and the efficiency down at the same time. So sort of a perfect storm, if you will. Well, fortunately, as a profession, there have always been more people wanting to be veterinarians than can be veterinarians. And what people don't realize is, we go through pretty much all the same training as an MD. It's very it's very selective getting into vet school. Until recently, there hadn't been an increase in vet schools in years. Now there's several new ones in the States. Over the last 10 to 15 years, most schools have increased their class size a bit. But those of us who have been in this profession for a while have seen that pendulum go back and forth a bit. There were big concerns coming out of the recession that there were way too many vets. Salaries were still way too low. Salaries, for the most part, haven't kept pace with inflation until just recently, really. And so, there are people that want to be veterinarians. The big challenge is going to be places in veterinary schools. You can't just open a vet school. Has to get accredited. It's again, you've got to be prepared to train just like a med school. And then there's at least 4 years before your first class will graduate. So it's a long-term process. Some schools have been able to increase their class size even a bit more. I think one of the other factors that limits our profession so much is our use of our veterinary technicians. Again, in human medicine, we rarely get to see our physician, right? We see a physician's assistant, we see an RN, a nurse practitioner, and honestly, that's okay for the vast majority of things we do. But that's not true in veterinary medicine, right? You almost always see your veterinarian. We're the ones putting our hands on the animal, and that's the way it's always been.
Yeah.
So,
well, David, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Well, so learning to and within veterinary technicians. Some states have licensure for vet techs, so they're very much like an RN in those states, and they can do almost everything we can do under supervision of a veterinarian, with some big exceptions, obviously surgery and diagnosing. But many states don't have licensure. They'll train technicians within their own practice, take people who love animals off the street, and so it's there needs to be more coordination there and define that paraprofessional level that can really help us with our work and get through a lot more patients. Most veterinarians still are general practitioners, although a growing number of our graduates do want to become specialists. So then, like human medicine, they'll do an internship and then a residency, which might be another 3 years or more, to become a specialist in cardiology, anesthesiology, you name it. So, that's another factor that is stretching our workforce a bit. We've got specialty practices growing. We've got now telehealth. You mentioned telemedicine. So we've got a lot of veterinarians now getting involved in that. Most veterinary practices expanded their hours right before the pandemic. So, your veterinarian likely has Saturday hours, but many practices have Sunday evening hours. So that stretched the workforce now too. So all of a sudden, instead of 8 to 5, we have to staff our hospitals from say 7 till 11. So you've got urgent care in there too. So so a lot of things impacting it. I think and it's there's a pretty big barrier to entry getting into vet school, getting through vet school, getting licensed. It's a lot to learn for sure. And a lot of people don't realize that. So.
Well, we're halfway through the best segments for the week. We come back, we'll take a look at the other half. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is your BRN Retirement Update. Well, credit card debt continues to rise among Americans, but as one financial expert told me, credit cards aren't necessarily a bad thing.
The big message that we deliver is not that credit is bad, right? Because we live in a society that it's impossible not to have credit. For example, one of the questions I ask, and I like my sessions to be interactive, is who is able to use cash on Amazon? Okay, credit is here with us to stay. So it's really the thoughtful use of credit and really understanding how credit works.
Well, it all comes down to managing your credit and, of course, your expenses. That's how you're going to get to a great and happy retirement. With your retirement update, I'm Jeffrey Snyder with the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. Next up, we discussed the closure of the North Dakota Public Defined Benefit Pension Plan. Let's take a look.
Well, our main PERS plan is a defined benefit plan. It's been in existence since 1977. Interestingly, the Legislative Assembly at that time did not think a defined contribution plan would provide a good enough retirement benefit, and so that's why they went to a defined benefit plan. We've had some funding issues like everyone did from the global financial crisis. Frankly, the Legislative Assembly has not done enough to help us recover from that. We've asked them every biennium since then for some additional contributions, and we were not successful in getting them. So we ended up proposing a few benefit reductions to try to get that normal cost down, to get the funding up. And unfortunately, they used that against us this session as far as their discussion on the quality of the retirement plan versus other states. It's still a very good plan, especially compared to other states around the country. But nonetheless, they use that in an effort to close our plan. close that defined benefit plan. And keep in mind, we take care of something like 10 different retirement plans, including many defined benefit plans, a defined contribution plan, a 457 deferred compensation plan. So we have experience with a lot of different things. They proposed in House Bill 1040 to close our defined benefit plan for new members effective January 1st of 2025, and have all new members go into a defined contribution plan, a different defined contribution plan than we have right now. Much lower contribution, mandatory contribution rate with an election opportunity for people who join that plan. Then interestingly, the last minutes, as we kind of talked before this, the last minutes of the Legislative Assembly, they tried throwing something into one of the bills to move that deadline up to January 1st of 2024. So a full year earlier than everyone had contemplated. Luckily, we were able to catch that and respectfully request, which was granted, the opportunity to at least have some input on whether that actually happens. And so what was also added to that bill was kind of a contingent effective date where it will become effective January 1st of 2024 if the retirement board certifies to the legislative management that that is possible. Right now, that's looking virtually impossible. There's too much programming, there's too many rules that need to be drafted. Frankly, too much going on. There's no way to get it done. But we'll give every effort that we can. But more than likely, this will go into effect January 1st, 2025. My board directed me to oppose the bill because we were not confident, the board was not confident that the Legislative Assembly would actually prudently fund the closure. And unfortunately, things that happened during the legislative session did not help that conclusion at all. We have been receiving a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls from current actives and from retirees, frankly, who are very concerned that the fund is going to run out of money. I responded to an active just a few minutes ago who asked what's going to happen if we run out of money. And to the Legislative Assembly's credit and the governor's credit, they've all come out and said, we promise this benefit to you folks for doing your job, and we will follow through on that. And so I would have to assume at the end of the day, if it's not funded the way that it needs to be funded, and we do end up running out of money, that the Legislative Assembly will appropriate the necessary dollars for us to make those benefit payments into the future. That's going to be very expensive. I mean, that makes it a pay-as-you-go system like this, like Social Security, and that becomes very expensive. Pre-funding is the way to go. We'll have to see next session whether they actually appropriate the actually determined employer contribution rate that's going to be necessary to actually fund this closure. But to get back to your question, we've had a lot of questions. We're about to send out an email blast to our employees to try to help quell that. My concern is we're going to have kind of some mass retirements. I was actually down in the City of Phoenix Employees Retirement System as their retirement program administrator when the city was contemplating closing the defined benefit plan, and that failed. And yet still 60 to 70% of actives who were eligible to retire took their retirement. And I'm afraid that we're going to lose a lot of people here in North Dakota very quickly. Unfortunately, I think we're going to realize exactly what the National Institute on Retirement Security just came out with as far as recruitment and retention in Alaska. A lot of the proponents of closing the plan were saying new members, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, they want portability. They want a 450s, or they want a 401k plan. They want a defined contribution plan. We have a defined contribution plan. It was open to all new state employees from 2013 to 2017. 3% of people took it. 97% of people stayed in the defined benefit plan. Their statements do not jive with our actual experience, the actual experience in other states. I think recruitment and retention is going to suffer greatly because exactly what you said, people come to the state for a career. They come to serve their public, to serve the citizens of the state of North Dakota. And they don't, I mean, we have salaries that are 10 to 12% lower than the private sector, but better benefits to try to make up for that. The Legislative Assembly, the governor is aware of that difficulty, and yet we just eliminated one of our biggest calling cards for people coming to work for us.
And finally, with the return to office slowing down, is there a commercial real estate crash on the horizon? Let's take a look.
It appears right now that it's sort of stabilized. We're sort of at a place where we're not seeing a lot of movement anymore of either going back to the office or requests for remote work. Although I am seeing a couple of large companies starting to make more pronouncements again. So that could shift, but for now it's been sort of steady. I don't think this is the great financial crisis, but there is a situation here where a lot of, especially small regional banks, have a lot of commercial real estate loans, which just makes sense because if you're getting a loan for an office building in a town, you'll probably work with a local bank versus some of the larger banks. So that does mean that some of the regional banks are under a little more stress in a time when office is probably at its weakest. You mentioned First Republic earlier that just got taken over by JP Morgan Chase. They had a lot of branches in both San Francisco and Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, we've seen a couple of high-profile buildings in downtown LA go into receivership. San Francisco market vacancy rate has been very high. So yeah, it seems the West Coast has been hard hit. New York, little weakness in Boston, although not that much because more of that real estate is research and development and lab real estate. Austin, Texas is starting to worry me a little bit because there's so much supply coming on in office because we had the big tech boom there a couple of years ago. Now you've got more office supply. Is it going to be absorbed quickly? So that one is a little bit of a concern for me. Retail is interesting. Retail has been surprisingly strong. Some smaller retail, I think you have to worry about. I think you have to worry about ground floor retail in major office buildings. That's a concern. Some of the central business district real estate, but overall retail has performed a lot stronger than people expected, and it sort of is something to keep in mind because people a few years ago were saying retail cycles where someone predicts doom. It's important to realize that sometimes that can be overblown. One of the things I'm watching is that some of the high profile asset managers, Brookfield, for example, have let some of those properties go into special servicing. Part of the reason they do that, though, is to get back to the negotiating table. I mean, the bottom line is banks don't really want to have this office real estate on, they don't want to deal with it any more than they wanted to own houses during the great financial crisis. So there's definitely going to be some room for negotiation, but for some of these, it just is going to make more sense to basically turn in the keys if you can't lease out the whole thing and get the rents to make it make sense.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest curated news and lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more in all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content? Well, visit our website and, of course, all of our streaming partners. We're back again tomorrow for BRN Sunday. I'll be joined by members of the media, academia, financial services, and government as we analyze and break down all the news and events for the week. You're not going to want to miss it. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes. Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the First Lifestyle and Wellness Network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device.
Tax audits, tax liens, wage garnishments.
Every day we hear stories like this about good folks who are simply struggling to pay their bills. Each of them are living a frightening IRS tax nightmare, and they are afraid it will destroy their lives.
I'm a divorced single mom, and my ex-husband left me and the kids with a lot of unpaid bills, including unpaid taxes. I was really starting to show my stress on my kids because the IRS had sent me a letter demanding a huge payment from me. I couldn't afford it. So then the IRS was threatening to garnish my wages. I'm already living paycheck to paycheck. That would have put me over the edge financially.
It truly seemed hopeless, but then a friend at work told her to call the tax relief line.
The people at the tax relief line, they told me about something called innocent spouse relief. They worked it out so that all of the taxes from my ex are not my problem. I don't know how that works, and I don't care. All I care about is that I don't owe the IRS a dime, and they are not going to take my paycheck.
Even if it seems hopeless, you should call the number on your screen right now. There is absolutely no cost for the call or the consultation. You are under no obligation. If you are worried that the IRS could garnish your wages, seize your assets, even take your home, call us right now. The Tax Relief Line is here to help you. Now you have a knowledgeable, professional team of tax experts that are ready to negotiate with the IRS and fight for you to save you money. The Tax Relief Line's professionals have successfully negotiated thousands of cases, reducing and sometimes even eliminating the tax debt for their clients. It's very easy to get started. Simply call the number on your screen right now. You don't have to live in fear anymore. The call and the consultation are free.